Hey folks, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew here to talk about prep time for your sessions and how you can use your time really efficiently, reducing the amount of prep time you need, but also, keeping your players engaged, having fun without, and also not wasting a lot of time prepping for things that aren't going to happen. And what this means is you think about how long are you going to run for and what are the players up to? What's going on in your world? And this came from, I did a community poll where I asked people, how much time do you spend with a homebrewed sandbox campaign to prepare? And half said 2+ hours, right, for each session. I put in there less than 10 minutes. I had 1% on that. A little bit of a gag and a little bit of an inside joke because I ran for many years, a friend of mine that ran this campaign that, he had done a lot of work setting up his world back when we were in high school and college. But then after that, famously, he prepped for 10 minutes and we just ran in his world and everything was just off the cuff, and we recognized this. We all knew it. He was a very entertaining guy. His world was fun, but it did descend a little bit into cartoony world or clearly improvised battles, clearly a lot of role play and a lot of talk that, reflected the fact that he really hadn't thought things out or his world wasn't developing. We were just running in his world. And I don't think that's what you want. Your players know, if you're good at it or you're a friend or it's a social setting, we can just go through that. But in a lot of ways, the reason people play D&D in a homebrewed world is to explore the world, have an impact on it, and watch it unfold. Watch it unfold based on the activities that the players are doing. So you don't want to wing it, right? But you also don't want to spend 6 hours or 10 hours putting something together and it never really comes to fruition, or you realize I could have just hand waved this or did a narrative on that. I didn't need all this work on it. Now, an important note here that when I say prep time, this is for a specific session, the next session you're going to play. The prep time you spend in building a homebrewed world is another topic, which I can cover too, because there's techniques to make that simpler. And I have actually covered this in some earlier videos that I did. This is actually for, you're going to have the next session. How much time are you going to spend on it? And as I said, what it depends on is how long are you going to run? If you're going to run for 3 hours, I've got to fill that 3 hours with the players so that they're engaged, we're having fun, and various storylines are moving on. Now, when I used to play D&D back in the day, we would get together on a weekend. This is 80s, 90s, even aughts. And we would get together on a weekend and run for from noon to 8 p.m., 8 hours. Well, prepping for 8 hours, that's quite a thing, right? Now, it was only once a month. So if, now I play 3 hours every week, well, that's actually when you go over a month, that's more time playing, right? But it's broken up, so it's easier to prepare for. I did once, and I've got some subscribers out there from this era when I was running in LA, Hollywood, California, where we ran for a year every week for 6 to 8 hours. So that was intense. And I finally burned out. I said, guys, and I got married and some other things happened. But now I run for 3 to 4 hours. This is whether it's online or at a game store. I have heard people run 2 hours, which I think is kind of the low end. If you're running an hour of D&D, as Gary Gygax used to say, you're not running D&D. But maybe you are if you've only got an hour. I don't know. But I'm going to use 3 hours as my template for this example. I've got to fill a 3-hour session for my players. So the next consideration is, what are they doing? And what I would say as a template is, are they on a mission or a quest or something? Are they running? And they're they're going here and then so that they can go here or whatever. They've got some task. And then within that, are they in the middle of a battle? Did you leave off? And literally what we will do is if we have a battle map, we'll take a picture, right? And then we'll leave because we had to end, especially if we're at this game store. If the guy comes and says, we got to close up the store, which means sometimes you will end right before the battle occurs. So what that means is you're preparing for this encounter that's going to take a certain amount of your 3 hours that you're going to spend. The final thing and the hardest, I guess, is if they've just come to they've finished some mission and they're at loose ends, they're spending time training or researching whatever in a town, they have their home base. And now you're, preparing for something you don't know about. Now, this final example is something that's the prep work you do to build your world, to set up adventure hooks, to continue to have storylines happen. The players influence something, and then a certain amount of time has gone by. They're back at their home base, and a person shows up and says, "Hey, X has happened because of what you did back here, earlier." Or they hear a rumor of this or that. And this is where you just do the adventure hooks. So in some ways, even though it seems like it's the hardest, it's the easiest to prepare if you've done the advanced work on that. But if you've got a session that, one, they're on the middle of a mission and you have never fleshed that out, well, now you're going to have to start fleshing it out. If they're in the middle of a battle, what happens after the battle, right? Again, is this part of a continuing thing? So you got to know what's going to happen after this battle occurs. So I'm going to start with the idea that they're on a mission, right? If the players know, so let's use an example. The players have found out that they have to go to this fishing village that's, a certain distance away from wherever they are at the end of the last session, and they have to get information. Some fisherman has discovered this island that has some artifact or bit of information or something that the players need. Or the players have heard about this treasure that's on this island, and this fisherman, in a storm went to this island and knows where it is. Whatever that is, for whatever motivation, the players are going to go there. They've clearly said that. So you have to think about, in the next session, one, they got to get to this fishing village. Two, they got to run the fishing village encounter. They've got to convince this fisherman to give them this information. And then three, they've got to potentially get to the village itself. And then in theory, they could explore the thing. I mean, how long do each of these things take? So here's the thing about this idea of going to this fishing village, getting the information about the island and going to the island. This can take as long or short as you want it to be. And that 3-hour session, the first session where the players say, okay, we're leaving for this village, that journey to the village could take 10 sessions if you want, or it could be a hand wave and they're just there, right? Because let's say that they're going to sail to this village. First of all, you got to role play and find someone to take them there. And, how much does it cost? Maybe it's out of the way that nobody goes there for some reason. So maybe you have to find a crew of a ship that's going to take you way out of where they ordinarily go. And you got to pay the money to do that. The other thing, of course, is there may be dangerous to sail there. The classic pirates or monsters or whatever. Although it's a fishing village, they're going out and fishing. So the question there is if they do this work and they role play, and they figure out, here's how to get a ship there, which might take, let's say, half an hour of game time, depending on how you do role-playing. Then you're going to sail there. Is there going to be an encounter? There's the old joke about these ships sail back and forth from cities, and they never have any problems. And the minute the players get on board, you have an encounter. Again, you can just roll randomly for sea encounters, or you can just hand wave it and say, there you are at the village, and that takes, 30 seconds, right? And they're at the village. Typically, I'm going to want to have something going on, either something with the ship, what are these guys up to? They're shady. This is why they're doing this. And maybe what I would do is set up, they're going to stop somewhere, two ships meet and they're smuggling stuff, or they go to another city and they say, just wait for us here. We're going to, something like that, where the players, there's an encounter there. So I'm going to build an encounter into this ship to travel. That's not necessarily just, the Kraken attacks the ship or the dragon turtle or whatever. Sagan come up and attack. Although you can do all those things. Pirates are especially fun. But there might be something more interesting. And then what you're doing in your other prep work is you've created some scenario where this sea captain or this ship might necessarily stop there and do something. They're smuggling something. There's clearly stuff on the ship, that's not to be there. And this is why it's really great to use sort of shady people. No one else wants to go to this fishing village. And these guys say, well, sure, I'll do it for like 100 gold or whatever your, gold is worth in your world, some very high fee, because they're up to something else. And do the players take the hook bait there, or do they say, no, we're just going to go on to our destination? The other thing that you can do with the fishing village, which is sort of counterintuitive, but they have to cross some landmass. They have to cross a burning desert to get to this village. And let's say it's 250 miles. Okay, well, how long does that take? First of all, they have to find out where the village is, find out how to get there. How do you cross the desert? Well, maybe you buy camels or hire them or whatever. Camels go 40 miles a day. Again, with food and water, if you've got high enough clerics, they can always do the create food and water, although that's a spell slot, right? But 40 miles a day, that's a little over 7 days. So they run that. They'd run, in the evening or morning, or if you want to run at night, the burning desert, you can't go during the day. And then do you have 7 random monster encounters? Depends, again, if that's just how you want, that's how I do it. And I always roll a 1 on a 1d6, maybe in the old super duper terrain, but desert seems a little empty to me. But so if you roll 1 on a 1d6 every day, you might get 1 or 2 encounters probably. Well, how long do those take, right? Each encounter, depending on if the players are just going to engage with it or try to flee from it or whatever, avoid it, however your players operate in your world, because they're trying to get to this fishing village. But if they get into an encounter, that's an hour or so. If you're playing 5e, that's going to take some time. That's going to kind of have where they get to the village and do some role playing there, because they're role playing a little bit beforehand to figure out, I got to cross the desert, I got to get the camels, I got to figure this out. Maybe half an hour there. They travel across the desert, they have an encounter, that's an hour. They get to the village and they've got to negotiate there. They got to find out, what's going on, and then they're going to figure out a way to travel to this island. Are they going to have an encounter when they're traveling to the island? And then they get to the island. And where are we at this point? Are we at about the 3-hour marker, right? And you can expand this. You could have the desert take up the entire session. Why? Because you can set up an encounter in the desert. Say an oasis. There's an oasis there, and these camel people, the people who sell them the camels say, go to this spot. You're refreshed there, and there's some storyline there. Either, bandits have taken over the oasis, or there's some rumor of some ruin, a desert ruin. Do the players take the bait? Depending on the urgency of what's going on with this fishing village and the quest they're on, do they say, hey, I want to look into this, right? I want to see what's going on in this desert ruin. But here's the thing. There is a chance that the players will not get any random, if you're going to just roll them, not any random monsters. They go to the oasis, unless you force their hand with the bandits or something that's taken over, they just get their thing. They hear about the desert temple, they say, forget it. And they get to the village, and it's been an hour, right? Or you hand wave it if you want and just say, okay, you cross the desert. I don't know why you would do that. I mean, crossing a burning desert seems like it's got great story potential, but whatever. Let's just say you get there in an hour and you got 2 hours to go. And you haven't prepared the island because you're thinking, well, they're going to do all this other stuff, so I don't want to do that, right? Because how long would it take if the oasis and the desert temple are brand new, you've never created them before, they're not one of your plugins that you've created in your other prep time, an hour, hour and a half or something. So now you've got this. Now, did you create the island when you gave the players the story hook to the island? Did you create this in it? You know exactly what it is, but I'm saying maybe not. Maybe you just, you had this guy do it and a little bit of improv at the end of a session, go here, go there. Well, there are ways then to improvise based on the prep work that you did, which is when you were thinking about crossing the desert, or when you were thinking about sailing a ship, or when you were thinking about taking a road network down to this fishing village, however the players were going to get to the village, and you've filled that up and you've said either I'm going to make that the entire session 3 hours to get to the village, or I'm going to make it 2 hours of the 3. You created some encounters, some random monster encounters, and you didn't have to do a lot of prep work for the random monsters. I always like to think about them in advance. I don't necessarily want to just roll them right there. I might be rolling a table in advance, but if I'm running through the desert and, I come up with some kind of, sandworm or something that, appears, well, I'm going to use that later at the village. The village is at the edge of this desert on this coast, let's just say. So when the players get to the village, I'm going to have the fishermen be out fishing somewhere, right? That's what they do. They go out and they go far out in the ocean. Maybe they have either this island that we're talking about, that doesn't seem realistic, but they have other little islands or places maybe they spend the night, because they got to go out to these fishing where the fish are on these undersea banks, with some shallow water. So he's gone. And so the players get there. Now you got the village. And this is usually what I think of it for a village is you've got some, a village elder, a former fisherman who's too old to go. And he's kind of, the wise man. And then you've got some of the local people or whatever. And one of those encounters that you created could be then plugged in here to say, oh, we're having problem with X. A sandworm, let's just say that there's the classic is some humanoids, whether you want to go orcs or hobgoblins, gnolls, you pick it, have been harassing us, breaking into things, whatever. They've moved into the area. Wouldn't it be great if someone were to take care of those for us, right? Now, again, your players may resist. They may say, okay, well, I'm not doing that. We'll just wait. When's he going to be back? And so, again, you're just, okay. Now, do you want to have then the gnolls attack the village itself, which they've never done before or whatever, to force the player's hand? That's a little railroady, right? So you could have the fisherman come back, but now he's irked because these guys wanted him to tell him about this island, and they wouldn't even help when there was the village was being threatened. So why should I help you? And you can say, well, you're forcing my hand on this. Well, you want this information from this fisherman. Maybe then you just pull out gold and say, here you go, right? Okay. And he says, I don't care about the gnolls. I've got enough money. I'm retiring. I'm getting off this stupid ship because they just gave me 100 gold pieces to do this. Okay. Again, and that's role playing. That's getting in there. How long does that take? Half hour? Because again, you've said, oh man, I prepared for this 3-hour session and I'm only an hour in. This is an absolute worst case scenario. Now I waited on this. I did some role play with the villagers. I didn't want to go for the gnolls. The fisherman comes back. I bribe him to take me there. So now I got to go to this island and I'm not prepared for it. Right? I didn't prepare enough. There's a bunch of ways to do this. One is to say, okay, well, we're going to go to this island, but the weather is such that you can only go there at a certain time. It's too dangerous. It's too whatever. You can get on this fishing craft and have an encounter, one of the encounters that you potentially had prepared if they went on a sea route, although this maybe they wouldn't have one. But again, you have these, break glass in an emergency. You got a plug-in sea type encounter that you're going to run. Right? The other thing to do is to go to the island and think about an encounter such that this might be something. So now you're in 2-hour territory, 2.5 hours, where it's clear we're not going to be able to run this tonight. The time is getting, we don't have time. We're just going to stop. Now, this is the reason, when I say 3 hours, we used to go online especially, not so much at the game store setup because the guy's got to close up the store, but in an online setting, people will say, I want to keep playing, right? And so you could use a plug-in encounter of any kind you want on the shores of this island when they get there, right? If you don't want to have a sea encounter, you want to have something here and you have this set up and you run that out and then you can go extra, right? So what you're doing is you're thinking about, I got a 3-hour session to fill. I know what the players are doing here. And I'm going to, put all this stuff together thinking they're going to go this way. But if in case they do, and nothing works out the way I thought it, no random monsters, they ignore the oasis. They ignore the shady stuff that the guys are doing on the ship. They just want to get to the village, get to the island and complete their task. Then you're going to have to put some plugins unless you have that island all set up, and then that becomes part of your setup. And in fact, that's the prep work that goes on when you're creating your world. You've created this island, but you've also created all this other stuff to fill up that 3 hours such that the next run is going to be the island. You fill that up with that. Now, as I said, if they're in the middle of a battle or about to fight a battle, we stop the battle on the beach because it was going to take up too much time, right? So now they're in that battle, so you got to prepare that for the next time, which might take you 10 or 15 minutes or you've already got it prepared. So you got an hour next time, and then you create the island and do the work there such that you can fill up the next 2 hours of the next session. And that's what you keep doing. You have your time to prep your homebrewed world, and you got to enjoy that, right? Because a lot of times what happens when you're preparing for a session, especially someone like me who procrastinates, I get down to if I'm running Monday, I get down to Sunday night or Monday afternoon, whatever it is, and I'm like, I got to put this all together, right? I've got a long-running prep that I've done for my whole world, but the actual session, the things the players did, what they're up to, I got to prepare for. So I'm thinking always about, I got to have 3 hours worth of material here and make sure that I've got that. And then if I need to plug in, either Monster of the Week or something from from another. I thought they might go this direction. I'm going to plug it in here. I'd rather have that stuff all prepared in advance so that I can always save that stuff and just accumulate, right? So that's how you can say, how long would it take you to, let's say they're going to go across the desert. I'm going to make the oasis, 2 random monsters, and a desert ruin kind of temple, maybe a 1 level dungeon, right? That's the big one is going to be, the big time sink is going to be the desert temple. That's going to be like an hour, something like that. Or you can always, by the way, find an old module somewhere that no one's ever heard of and use that, although then you got to convert it. And I've looked at some of the drive-through RPG ones. A lot of them aren't very good, in my humble opinion. I can just come up with something. But whatever, that would take me about an hour, 2 random monsters, and just give myself an overview, again, about 2 hours, right, to prepare for that 3-hour session. Because the thing is, if you're 6 hours for 3 hours, you're going to get burned out. You want to be spending that time preparing your world in times that you're just enjoying it, not under the gun when you're trying to get ready to play. So I hope that's helpful to you. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. Always looking for more. I'd love to hear about more on that. I got some great comments from my poll on the prep time that people took. Love to hear more. And most importantly, keep playing a role-playing game and tell somebody else about it.